There comes a moment in every life when the greatest enemy is not outside us, but within us, not people, not circumstances, but the quiet voice that whispers, "Give up." Psalm 42 confronts that voice head on. It does not deny pain. It does not pretend struggle doesn't exist. Instead, it asks a powerful question. Why are you cast down, O my soul? Why are you disturbed within me? This is not weakness. This is mastery. Because the moment you question a negative thought, you remove its authority. Most people allow their emotions to command their future. But Psalm 42 teaches something revolutionary. You can command your emotions. Notice this, the psalmist speaks to his soul, not from it. He does not say, "I am hopeless." He says, "Hope in God." That is a decision, and decisions shape destiny. You see, the human mind was designed to obey direction. When left undirected, it drifts into fear. But when guided by truth, it rises into strength. They are fought silently, repeatedly, and often alone, in the mind. Every victory or defeat that shows up on the outside first takes shape on the inside. Before a person loses strength in their body, they lose it in their thinking. Before hope disappears from actions, it disappears from thoughts. The mind is not just a place where ideas pass through, it is the command center that determines direction, endurance, and outcome. Most people believe their circumstances are the source of their struggles, but circumstances are only messengers. The true battlefield is how the mind interprets those circumstances. Two people can face the same pressure, the same delay, the same disappointment, and yet walk away with completely different outcomes. One collapses under the weight of it, while the other grows stronger. The difference is not intelligence, talent, or opportunity. The difference is mental control. The mind was designed to receive instruction. If it is not deliberately directed, it will default to fear, doubt, and negative imagination. A mind without leadership becomes a breeding ground for inner chaos. Thoughts begin to repeat themselves. Emotions begin to dominate decisions, and the soul slowly accepts limits that were never meant to exist. This is how inner defeat begins, not with a loud collapse, but with quiet agreement to discouraging thoughts. When the mind is left unchecked, it magnifies problems and minimizes strength. It takes temporary emotions and turns them into permanent conclusions. One difficult season becomes, "This is how life will always be." One setback becomes, "Nothing ever works out." These statements may feel true in the moment, but feelings are not facts. The danger is not feeling them. The danger is believing them without challenge. This is why the battlefield of the mind demands awareness. Every thought is either a weapon or a wound. Every repeated belief is either building resilience or eroding it. What a person consistently tells themselves becomes the lens through which they see reality. Over time, that lens determines confidence, persistence, and even physical energy. The most powerful lesson hidden in Psalm 42 is not emotional expression, it is mental interrogation. The soul is questioned instead of obeyed. Negative thoughts are not accepted as final authority. The mind does not say, "I feel low, therefore I am defeated." It says, "Why are you cast down?" That question alone shifts power. It exposes the thought to examination instead of submission. Mastery begins when a person learns that they are not their thoughts. Thoughts are visitors, not rulers. They arrive uninvited, but they do not have to stay. The mind can be trained to accept truth and reject lies, just as the body can be trained to accept discipline and reject weakness. This training does not happen overnight. It happens through repetition, intentional focus, and persistence. A disciplined mind does not wait for motivation to act. It acts based on decision. Feelings fluctuate, but decisions anchor direction. When the mind is governed by emotion alone, progress becomes inconsistent. When it is governed by conviction, progress becomes inevitable. This is why inner dialogue matters more than outer noise. What you say to yourself in silence shapes what you tolerate in life. The battlefield intensifies during quiet moments. When distractions fade, thoughts speak louder. This is where many people lose ground. They replay regrets, imagine worst-case scenarios, and rehearse fear without realizing they are strengthening it. Rehearsal is not neutral. What is rehearsed becomes familiar, and what is familiar becomes believable. Faith-based thinking interrupts this cycle by introducing a higher authority than emotion. Instead of asking, "How do I feel?" the mind asks, "What is true?" Truth becomes the standard, not mood. Hope becomes a choice, not a reaction. Praise becomes an act of mental alignment, not denial of reality. The battlefield of the mind is won through consistency, not intensity. One moment of encouragement cannot overpower years of negative reinforcement. But small, repeated acts of truth reshape thinking patterns over time. Just as erosion reshapes stone through repetition, disciplined thought reshapes character through persistence. Every time the mind chooses hope over despair, strength increases. Every time it chooses truth over fear, clarity grows. Every time it refuses to surrender to inner accusations, authority is reclaimed. These victories may feel small, but they accumulate. Over time, the soul begins to respond differently. Reactions change, confidence stabilizes, peace becomes less fragile. A mind trained in hope does not ignore difficulty, it refuses to be defined by it. It acknowledges pain without surrendering purpose. It recognizes struggle without accepting defeat. This balance is where true resilience is formed, not in pretending everything is fine, but in knowing that difficulty does know, instantly tells themselves about who they are, what they can endure, and what is possible for them. Every human life moves in the direction of its dominant thoughts. This is not poetry, it is principle. The mind listens most closely to the voice it hears most often, and that voice is usually its own. Whether spoken silently or aloud, repeated statements become accepted beliefs, and accepted beliefs quietly dictate behavior. People do not rise or fall by chance. They rise or fall by agreement with their own inner words. Most individuals underestimate the creative power of self-talk. They think words are harmless if no one else hears them. But the mind does not distinguish between spoken truth and rehearsed assumption. It accepts repetition as instruction. When discouraging thoughts are repeated without resistance, the mind interprets them as facts. Over time, confidence erodes not because strength disappeared, but because belief was withdrawn. Psalm 42 reveals a rare discipline: speak into the soul instead of being spoken to by it. This is the turning point where destiny begins to shift. Instead of allowing emotion to dictate identity, the inner voice challenges it. This is not denial of feeling, it is correction of direction. The soul may feel cast down, but feeling does not get the final vote. Uncontrolled self-talk tends to exaggerate failure and minimize potential. One mistake becomes a label. One delay becomes a verdict. The inner voice says, always and never, turning temporary conditions into permanent identities. This is how people abandon dreams without realizing they made a decision. They did not quit because they lacked ability. They quit because their inner dialogue convinced them resistance was pointless. Positive self-talk is often misunderstood as shallow optimism. True self-talk transformation is not pretending difficulty doesn't exist. It is choosing what authority difficulty has. It is the deliberate act of replacing reaction with intention. When the inner voice shifts from complaint to command, the mind regains leadership. The soul responds to direction. When it hears hopeless language, it weakens. When it hears words of expectation, it strengthens. This is why the psalm does not ask circumstances to change first. It commands the soul to hope. Hope is not a mood, it is a posture. It is a mental stance that says the present moment does not define the final outcome. What a person says to themselves today becomes the foundation they stand on tomorrow. Repeated words shape perception, and perception shapes choices. Choices, made consistently, shape destiny. This chain reaction is subtle but unstoppable. No external force has more influence over a person's future than their own internal narrative. Self-talk also determines endurance. Many people have the ability to start, but lack the inner language to continue. When pressure increases, the inner voice either says, "I can do this," or "this is too much." The body often has more strength than the mind allows it to use. The limit is not physical, it is verbal. The discipline of constructive self-talk does not come naturally. The mind resists change because familiarity feels safe, even when it is destructive. Negative self-talk often feels honest because it aligns with emotion, but honesty without truth leads to surrender. Truth must be chosen, especially when it contradicts feeling. Every time the inner voice speaks hope in the face of heaviness, it lays an EU mental pathway. The brain adapts to repetition. What is spoken often becomes automatic. Over time, the voice of encouragement grows stronger and the voice of accusation grows weaker. This is not sudden transformation, it is daily alignment. The most powerful words in Psalm 42 are not emotional expressions, but directives. Hope in God is spoken as an instruction, not a wish. This reveals that the soul can be trained. Just as habits are formed through repetition, belief is formed through rehearsal. What is rehearsed internally becomes reality externally. Destiny responds to agreement. When a person agrees with fear, fear expands. When a person agrees with hope, possibility expands. Agreement is the gateway through which influence enters. This is why guarding self-talk is not optional, it is essential. A person may not control every event, but they always control their interpretation of it. Self-talk also shapes identity. People become what they repeatedly call themselves. Labels, spoken inwardly, eventually become lived outwardly. When someone consistently speaks weakness, they live cautiously. When someone consistently speaks strength, they live boldly. Identity is not discovered, it is reinforced. Transformation begins when the inner voice stops echoing circumstance and starts echoing truth. This is the moment the future loosens its grip on limitation. Progress may be slow, but direction is set. Even small shifts in self-talk produce long-term change. The soul listens closely when spoken to with authority. When the mind speaks with clarity and conviction, confusion retreats. When the inner voice becomes aligned with truth, peace stabilizes. This is not emotional suppression. It is mental leadership. A life does not move forward because conditions improve. Conditions often improve because inner language changes. When the mind expects strength, it looks for solutions. When it expects defeat, it looks for exits. What it looks for, it usually finds. Self-talk is not a side issue. It is the steering wheel of destiny. Where it turns, life follows. The moment a person learns to speak life instead of surrender, hope instead of helplessness, direction instead of despair, the future quietly begins to reorganize itself around that decision. Faith is often misunderstood because people expect it to feel powerful before it becomes effective. They wait for emotion to rise, for confidence to appear, for peace to arrive, and then they decide to believe. But faith does not begin with feeling, it begins with choice. Feelings are responses to conditions, but faith is a response to truth. When faith is reduced to emotion, it becomes unstable, rising and falling with circumstances. When faith is understood as a decision, it becomes steady, grounded, and resilient. Every feeling is temporary. It changes with sleep, with stress, with words spoken by others, and with moments that pass quickly. If faith depended on feeling, it would disappear the moment pressure increased. This is why many people believe they have lost faith, when in reality they have only lost a certain feeling. The foundation was never meant to be emotion. Faith was designed to function even when emotion resists. Decision is the highest function of the mind. Feelings follow decisions, not the other way around. A person decides to stand before they feel strong. They decide to continue before they feel hopeful. They decide to trust before clarity appears. This is the unseen strength of faith. It does not wait for permission from emotion. It acts in advance of it. Psalm 42 reveals this principle with striking clarity. The soul is disturbed, cast down, unsettled. Yet the instruction is not to wait till calm returns. The instruction is to hope. Hope is commanded, not requested. This shows that faith operates independently of emotional comfort. It does not deny distress, but it refuses to allow distress to lead. Many people confuse honesty with surrender. They believe that acknowledging how they feel means they must also accept the conclusion that feeling suggests. But feelings describe a moment. They do not define reality. Faith acknowledges emotion without obeying it. It recognizes heaviness, but does not build a future around it. When faith becomes a decision, responsibility returns to the individual. Waiting feels passive and safe, but deciding feels demanding. Decision requires ownership. It says, regardless of how I feel today, I will align myself with what is true. This alignment is where inner stability is formed. Without it, the mind becomes reactive, pulled in every direction by circumstance. Faith as decision is not blind optimism, it is informed trust. It is the choice to anchor oneself to a higher perspective when the lower one feels louder. This choice often feels uncomfortable at first because it contradicts emotion. But discomfort is not danger. It is often a sign of growth. The human mind seeks consistency. When faith is practiced as a decision repeatedly, the mind begins to adapt. Emotional resistance weakens. What once felt forced becomes familiar. Over time, peace follows obedience. Strength follows commitment. Feelings eventually align with the decision that was made earlier. This is why persistence matters more than intensity. A single emotional moment of belief cannot sustain long-term endurance, but a quiet, repeated decision builds resilience. Faith grows stronger, not through dramatic experiences, but through daily alignment with truth, despite inner resistance. Feelings often argue for retreat. They highlight exhaustion, delay, and uncertainty. Faith answers those arguments with resolve. It does not silence emotion, it places it in its proper position. Emotion becomes information, not instruction. The soul may speak, but it does not rule. Decision-based faith transforms behavior. When a person decides to trust, their actions begin to reflect expectation instead of fear. They prepare, they persist, they are open. This behavioral shift often precedes emotional change. Courage is often felt after action, not before it. Many people believe peace must come before obedience. In reality, peace often comes because of obedience. Faith does not wait to feel safe before moving forward. It moves forward and discovers safety along the way. This is not recklessness, it is trust in something greater than present sensation. The discipline of choosing faith daily strengthens inner authority. Each decision reinforces identity. A person becomes someone who does not collapse under emotional pressure. They become steady, not because life is easy, but because direction is clear. This clarity becomes an anchor during instability. Faith as decision also protects against discouragement. When belief is emotional, discouragement feels personal and final. When belief is decided, discouragement becomes temporary noise. It may speak loudly, but it no longer has veto power. The soul learns through repetition. Each time faith is chosen, in the absence of feeling, the soul is trained to respond differently. Over time, emotional storms lose their power to dominate. They may still arise, but they no longer control movement. This is not suppression of emotion. Suppressed emotion grows stronger. This is leadership over emotion. Leadership does not deny reality, it organizes it. Faith organizes inner chaos by giving it direction. It does not eliminate struggle, it gives struggle purpose. A life built on feeling is fragile. A life built on decision is durable. Faith was never meant to depend on ideal conditions. It was designed for pressure, uncertainty, and waiting. Its strength is revealed not when everything aligns, but when nothing does and it stands anyway. The decision to believe changes the atmosphere of the mind. Thoughts shift from what if to even if. Even if the answer is delayed, trust remains. Even if clarity is absent, commitment stands. This posture reshapes expectation and restores momentum. Faith matures when it is practiced without emotional reward. This maturity produces confidence that is quiet but unshakable. It does not need constant reassurance. It rests in alignment rather than sensation. When faith is chosen consistently, feelings eventually follow. Hope begins to rise, not because circumstances changed, but because direction did. Peace stabilizes, not because uncertainty vanished, but because authority was reclaimed. This is the power of decided faith. It does not wait for the storm to pass. It walks through it with conviction. It does not ask emotion for permission. It moves forward because truth has been chosen. And once truth is chosen, the future adjusts itself to that decision. Persistence is the quiet force that turns belief into experience. Many people believe once, hope once, pray once, and then wait for immediate change. When change does not arrive quickly, they assume nothing happened. But divine power is rarely activated by a single moment. It responds to continuity. Persistence is not repetition born out of doubt. It is repetition born out of certainty that truth remains true even when results are delayed. The greatest misunderstanding about persistence is that it is human effort trying harder. True persistence is alignment that refuses to break. It is the steady decision to remain positioned in faith regardless of what emotions, circumstances, or delays attempt to communicate. When persistence is present, faith matures. When faith matures, power flows consistently rather than sporadically. Divine power does not operate on urgency, it operates on order. Order is established when a person continues to believe, speak, and act in agreement with truth, even when nothing appears to change. This constancy creates spiritual momentum. Momentum is invisible at first, but it is always working beneath the surface. What looks like silence is often preparation. Many people stop just before breakthrough because persistence feels unrewarded. The mind begins to question whether effort matters, whether hope is realistic, whether continuing is wise. This moment is not proof of failure. It is evidence that resistance has been encountered. Resistance appears when progress is near. If nothing were happening, there would be nothing to resist. Psalm 42 demonstrates persistence not through dramatic action, but through repeated return to hope. The same instruction is spoken again and again. This repetition is not weakness, it is discipline. The soul does not change instantly because it has been trained over time to respond to fear. Persistence retrains it to respond to truth. Divine power responds to alignment. and alignment is sustained through persistence. One prayer aligns the heart momentarily. Continued trust aligns the life. Power flows most freely where consistency exists. That's why persistence matters more than intensity. Intensity flares up and burns out. Persistence remains steady and builds strength gradually. Every repeated act of faith reinforces spiritual authority. Each time hope is chosen again, confidence deepens. Each time truth is spoken again, doubt loses ground. These shifts may feel small, but they accumulate. Over time, the inner atmosphere changes. What once felt heavy begins to feel lighter, not because circumstances changed, but because endurance expanded. Persistence also purifies intention. When belief is tested over time, shallow motivation falls away. What remains is conviction. Conviction does not depend on reward, it depends on alignment. This is where divine power becomes evident. Power flows where faith is no longer conditional. Many expect divine intervention to replace persistence, but it works through it. Persistence keeps the door open. It keeps the heart receptive. It keeps expectation alive. When persistence stops, alignment, NT, breaks. When alignment breaks, flow is interrupted, not because power is absent, but because access has been abandoned. The soul learns through repetition. Just as muscles strengthen through consistent resistance, inner strength grows through sustained faith. Each time persistence overcomes discouragement, resilience increases. Each time it overcomes delay, patience deepens. Each time it overcomes silence, trust matures. Persistence does not mean ignoring reality. It means refusing to let reality dictate final meaning. It acknowledges struggle without surrendering to it. It recognizes delay without assuming denial. This posture keeps the mind anchored and the spirit receptive. Divine power often moves progressively rather than suddenly. The change may begin internally before it becomes visible externally. Peace stabilizes before circumstances shift. Clarity forms before answers appear. Strength develops before relief arrives. Those who persist notice these subtle changes. Those who quit miss them. Consistency creates capacity. The more a person persists, the more they are able to carry. What once overwhelmed becomes manageable. What once felt impossible becomes familiar. This increased capacity is itself evidence of power at work. Not all miracles are dramatic. Many are gradual transformations of endurance. Persistence also reshapes identity. A person who continues despite difficulty begins to see themselves differently. They are no longer someone who gives up easily. They become someone who stands. This identity shift attracts further strength. The mind begins to expect endurance instead of escape. Divine power responds to expectancy that does not fade. Expectancy is not impatience. It is quiet confidence that remains even when timelines stretch. This confidence creates spiritual stability. Stability allows power to operate without disruption. Many underestimate how close they are to change. They interpret delay as distance when often it is depth. Something is being strengthened beneath the surface. Persistence allows that process to complete. Quitting interrupts it. The repeated declaration of hope in Psalm 42 is not poetic repetition. It is strategic persistence. Each repetition reinforces truth against resistance. Over time, truth becomes dominant. When truth dominates, peace follows naturally. Persistence keeps faith active. Faith that is not exercised weakens. Faith that is practiced strengthens. Each act of persistence is an act of cooperation with divine order. Cooperation creates flow. Flow produces results in the right time. What looks like waiting is often working. What feels like stillness is often alignment. Persistent. CE remains present long enough to see this unfold. Those who persist discover that divine power was never absent. It was responding to consistency. Power is not activated by desperation, but by steadfastness. Desperation demands immediate relief. Persistence trusts the process. This trust creates space for power to move fully and completely. When persistence becomes a way of life, discouragement loses its authority. Setbacks no longer define direction. Delay no longer dictates belief. The soul becomes steady, the mind becomes anchored, and strength becomes reliable. This is how persistence activates divine power, not through force, but through faithfulness. Not through urgency, but through endurance. Not through emotion, but through alignment that refuses to break, continues to hope, continues to trust, and continues to stand until inner transformation becomes outward reality.